The release date for the next saga has been announced, and we will witness the magic of the Wisdom Saga on August 30th. In my last video, I said that I had more thoughts on the Thunder Saga, so I have to get those out before we move on. And I want to talk about Eurylochus because I have beef with this man, like I'm the cow that he slaughtered. And that being said, Armando Julian, that man deserves his applause and 1,000 roses. My love and heart goes out to him. He has been such an integral part of the story that I've been processing the fact that his piece is over, and I don't know how that makes me feel. It just makes me feel something. I'm of course excited to meet the upcoming characters, but he's such a pillar to the story that I just wanted to take a moment to express my gratitude for what Armando Julian has brought to Epic and how he brought Eurylochus to life. But with that out of the way, let's get to talking about the character of Eurylochus. There's something that I've headcanoned, so it's a theory, and until we have an official animated film of Epic, or the lyrics explicitly say it, all theories are valid. So take it or leave it, but my headcanon is that someone, probably Eurylochus, let a siren live. There are a few things that make me think this. For example, in Different Beast, the crew sings,
"We are a different beast now. We are the ones who feast now. No more of us deceased, 'cause we won't take more suffering from you."
But when Odysseus gives the order to cut off their tails, kill them, and throw them back in the water, that chorus changes to, "He is a different beast now."
He is a different beast now. He is the one who feasts now. No more of us deceased, 'cause he won't take more suffering from you.
So there's that. There's this distinction that emphasizes that Odysseus is the beast and the monster here, right? The crew was singing and joining along until they had to do something gory. And maybe that's not enough to say that someone probably let a siren escape. But what made him particularly suspicious is when Odysseus has to repeat himself when he sings "kill them all," and you can hear his voice becoming harsher each time. Now, you could say that this is because he's becoming colder with each kill. Yes, but I also think it's because someone is hesitating, right? His voice is becoming harsher each time until the fourth time, where his singing is very clearly more like a command.
Kill them all. Kill them all. Kill them all. Kill them all.
What's making me think that it's Eurylochus specifically is because he has a history of undermining him. But also, one of the things that Mutiny is reiterating is how the tables have turned on them. Their storylines certainly rhyme, but they are not parallel. And what I mean by this is that while we hear a lot of lines echoed from previous sagas, Odysseus and Eurylochus could not be further apart. Where in the first act, it is Eurylochus cautioning him against the gods.
Please don't tell me you're about to do what I think you'll do.
In the second one, Odysseus is pleading that he not do what he's about to do.
Please don't tell me you're about to do what I think you'll do.
But the context around the line the first time around is that Eurylochus is preventing him from seeking the help of the gods by claiming that they're dangerous, while Odysseus, in the second arc, is begging him not to slaughter and eat the holy divine cattle who are roaming around on the island of the sun god. In part 1, Odysseus proceeds to seek out the wind god and be relatively successful in his endeavor, if it wasn't for Eurylochus. But after this, in the Circe saga, Eurylochus is ready to abandon his crew, to which Odysseus refuses. So up to this point, they have actually really been at odds. It is during and after their journey to the underworld where the flip occurs. My guess is that this is happening because Odysseus is bearing the brunt of the deaths of his fleet head on, where he also has to face the possibility of not getting home. This is something that he firmly rejects. He will make it home to Penelope and Telemachus and obliterate anything that gets in his way, foe or friend. Prioritizing the crew got him betrayed. Ruthlessness is mercy upon himself. On the other hand, in this saga, Eurylochus is awfully quiet. We hear him as second in command in the Troy saga, we hear him as backup support in the Cyclops saga, we hear him as opposition in the Storm saga, and finally, as the seed of insecurity in the Circe saga. In the underworld, his voice melts into the background with the rest of the crew. I wonder why. And we don't hear Eurylochus' voice again until midway through the Thunder Saga in Scylla, where he reveals the secret that he wanted to get off his chest.
I got a secret I can no longer keep. Deep down,
You know that we are the same.
I opened the wind bag while you were asleep.
But before we get there, I want to dwell on what I just said about how Odysseus is determined to make it home and how he will obliterate any foe or friend that gets in his way. In No Longer You, it's kind of unclear what Odysseus is taking away from the prophecy. In the first half there, it seems clear that he thinks that Tiresias is not of any help despite their journey to get there.
This can't be. We've suffered and sailed through the toughest of hells. Now you tell us our efforts for nothing.
And this is further cemented when Penelope is brought up and he wants to know who this haunting man beside his wife could be.
I see your wife with a man who is haunting, a man with a trail of bodies.
This is actually something that I absolutely love about prophecy, but that's besides the point. The point is that we don't actually know what it is that Odysseus knows and what he took away from his encounter with the prophet Tiresias, because in the next song, Monster, he asks,
How am I to reunite with my estranged? Do I need to change?
if his takeaway from Tiresias is that he was in fact no help, then that implies that Odysseus understands that he's never gonna get to make it home. But that doesn't seem to be entirely the case, since in Monster, he is coming to the realization that he can get home, he just can't stay the same. And I feel like this is supported by the fact that he says,
What if the greatest threat we'll find across the sea is me? What if I'm the monster?
but this train of thought is complicated because Odysseus then goes on to reflect about his past mistakes and how those make him a monster. So we can't be 100% sure that he is interpreting the prophecy to mean that he is the haunting man beside Penelope, so therefore he must become the monster. It's unclear. It could also be the case that he heard Tiresias, didn't think he was any help, and immediately went into denial. So he firmly rejects any idea that he does not get to go home, even if it's coming from a brilliant prophet. So that could also be what's happening in Monster. And I think that does make sense because the nature of prophecy is to be vague and to be misunderstood. But I think the prophecy sticks with Odysseus because from the point where they leave the underworld, he has changed in more than one way, and it's because of the prophecy. Because whether he rejects a future where he does not to go home or not, Tiresias is still a prophet, and his opening line is that he sees time running free.
I am the prophet with the answers you seek. Time, I've unlocked it. I see past and future running free.
So it's actually unclear if what he's saying is about the past or the future, right? So let's listen to the prophecy.
I see a song of past romance. I see the sacrifice of man. I see portrayals of betrayal and a brother's final stand. I see you on the brink of death. I see you try your final breath. I see a man who gets to make it home alive, but it's no longer you.
From the audience perspective, we know that it's all about the future. The Song of Past Romance is about his upcoming encounter with the Sirens. The Sacrifice of Man is about Scylla's cave. The Portrayal of Betrayal is about mutiny. And being on the brink of death could be about getting stabbed, but it could also be about the aftermath of Lightning Bringer, where he's also struggling to breathe because the ship was destroyed at sea. So we know that it's about the future, but whether Odysseus knows this is unclear because this could also be a reference to the past. If Odysseus never gets to get home, then the song of past romance is Penelope. The sacrifice of man is about Polyphemus's cave where Polites dies. The portrayal of betrayal is a reference to whoever opened that bag, and the brothers' final stand could be about the men that Poseidon killed, or it could also be a reference to Eurylochus suggesting that they leave their brothers in Circe's island. But the point is that the prophecy is vague and we don't know how Odysseus is interpreting it. But what we do know is that it changes him. Not only because he embraces becoming a monster, but because he is now wary of his companions. Whether he is interpreting it in the past tense or as an upcoming event does not matter, because what does not change is the fact that at this point in the Underworld Saga, one of them has already betrayed him. He may have turned a blind eye during the Circe Saga because 500 men had just died in the Storm Saga. Why would he want to kill more? But during and after the Underworld Saga, he comes to the conclusion that that's not gonna cut it. Traitors are gonna get a torch.
Eurylochus, light up 6 torches.
If you're interested, definitely check out my last video on how I think he fully intended for Eurylochus to die along with his closest companions. But anyway, I think this is a tangible change that happens within Odysseus, and we see this change in the absence of how he addresses his men. In the Troy Saga, he starts his whole journey with Odysseus addressing his men.
Alright, my brothers, listen closely.
Then in the Cyclops Saga, he once again addresses them.
My brothers!
In the Storm Saga, they're headed home after losing 72 men, most importantly Polites, but Odysseus is still addressing his men as both comrades and brothers.
There's no time to die, comrades! Sir. Brace for a storm!
In Luck Runs Out, despite Eurylochus casting doubt on his leadership, Odysseus still addresses him as a friend.
I still believe in goodness.
That won't age well.
I still believe that we could be kind. Lead from the heart and see what starts.
And what will we do when it tears us apart?
Where is this coming from, my friend?
And then again, he addresses his men as friends after acquiring the wind bag.
Captain, what's happened? What's trapped in that bag? Something dangerous, friends, we mustn't lag.
It's treasure.
What?
Bye-bye.
His demeanor does change slightly here because he has been warned that he needs to keep his friends close and his enemies closer.
Open the bag! Let's see what you got. No, do not! Everybody listen closely. See how this bag is closed? That's how it's supposed to be. This bag has the storm inside. We cannot let the treasure rumor fly.
We'll try.
He understands what the test is. That is why he stays awake for 9 days until he literally can't stay awake anymore. But anyway, he's betrayed and Eurylochus tries to confess at the start of the Circe Saga, but Odysseus cuts him off. But it's obvious, Eurylochus is the second in command. If he didn't do it himself, he would have at least been watching. But even still, this man is a goddamn fool because he still tells Eurylochus.
There's no length I wouldn't go if it was you I had to save. I can only hope you'd do the same.
I can hear her still.
Crickets. That man wouldn't do the same. He said it without saying it. And okay, this is my own reminder that this is supposed to be a Eurylochus video, but we're almost getting back to him. Let me just finish this thought about how the prophecy changed Odysseus. So again, we see how he addresses his men as brothers, friends, and comrades, even after he's been betrayed, because this is how he starts the Underworld Saga.
Friends, Circe's instructions were clear. No matter what we hear,
Full speed ahead.
until we find the prophet, my comrades. This land confuses your mind, so no matter who we find,
Full speed ahead until we find the prophet.
But in No Longer You, he receives his prophecy, and in the next song, he is determined to become a monster to ensure that he gets home. And again, this is where it's unclear as to how he's interpreting the prophecy, because he says,
I must become the monster, and then we'll make it home.
So he is including his men at this point, but in the Thunder Saga, the change has already occurred.
But while you were so focused on turning my men into snacks, you didn't notice that your friends got snatched.
We hear him use the word friend, but it's no longer in reference to his men. When the time comes to address them, he only gives them an order. He doesn't refer to them as friends, comrades, or brothers.
Cut off their tails! We're ending this now! Throw their bodies back in the water. Let them drown.
When he addresses Eurylochus and Scylla, it's by his name, and the next time that he refers to his men as his brothers, it's after they've betrayed him and the prophecy has already been fulfilled.
My brothers, why?
And then the last time that he addresses them, he is once again only giving commands.
We need to get away from this island now! Grab an arm with all the strength your arms allow! These cows were immortal. They were the sun god's friends. And now that we've pissed them off, who do you think you'll send? Full speed ahead! Full speed ahead! Faster! Full speed ahead! Faster! Full speed ahead! We're too late.
It's so good. When I tell you the tension and the anxiety that I get when I listen to this, it's just so good. But anyway, that was a really long tangent, but my point was to say that while it's unclear what he understood from the prophecy, it changed Odysseus, not only because he realized that he needed to become a monster, but also because he's come to terms with the fact that he can't let anything or anyone get in his way, including his own men who were once his friends and his brothers. But anyway, we were supposed to be talking about Eurylochus and the change that he is undergoing at the same time as Odysseus after the Underworld Saga. So after being so noticeably quiet during the trip to the Underworld, we finally hear Eurylochus again midway through the Thunder Saga, where he confesses the thing that he wanted to get off his chest.
I opened the wind bag while you were asleep.
Leaving them feeling betrayed, breaking the bonds that you've made.
I'm so sorry.
There is no price we won't pay.
Forgive me.
We both know what it takes to survive.
This is where the echoes to Odysseus' journey begin. When he apologizes, he asks for forgiveness. The difference between Eurylochus asking for forgiveness and Odysseus saying the same thing is that Odysseus is tying up loose ends to ensure that Hector's son does not become a threat in the future. When it comes to Eurylochus asking for forgiveness, he also received a warning about what was in the bag and he forsook it, and that led to the deaths of 557. And no, actually, I'm blaming him for the full 558 because Elpenor was a part of his scavenging crew. And, well, Elpenor's death seems like it was kind of his own fault.
I died and nobody noticed. I died and nobody cared. Elpenor, how did this happen? When did you meet your despair? I drank wine from a chalice on top of Circe's palace and fell and broke my neck in shame. But what do you care? So many deaths happen under your reign.
But my point is that if anyone should have noticed that one of the men was missing, it should have been Eurylochus, who knew exactly who went into Circe's palace. Anyway, then they pass through the lair of Scylla, and this is where Eurylochus begins his mutiny, and this is where we hear a callback to Luck Runs Out, and it's actually referenced twice in the song, so I'm gonna start with when they betray him.
How are we supposed to trust you now? Now, your time has come, your luck's run out. Now, the time has come to shut you down. You relied on wit, and then we died on it. Whoa.
This is clearly a callback to when Eurylochus foreshadows this event.
How much longer till the snake breaks free? How much longer till your great day cease? How much longer till your strength takes leave? You
was the snake that broke free. And something that I find so peculiar is, well, first of all, how personal Eurylochus takes the sacrifice of 6 men, like he isn't to blame for the deaths of 557, and that he insisted that they abandon the ones who turned to pigs, but also because he doesn't actually propose a way that they could have actually handled the situation.
When we fought the Cyclops, you were quick to hatch a plan. And when we fought with Circe, it was you who left behind no man. But when we saw this monster, we didn't take a stand. We just ran.
Like, what would he have them do exactly? Even Poseidon, the god that they are literally on the run from, fears to tread those waters. And I don't know, perhaps his big sword is indicative of his personality being more about brute strength. But anyway, after his uprising and they dock at the island with the oxen of the sun, we hear our next callback to Luck Runs Out.
Please don't tell me you're about to do what I think you'll do.
The situation here highlights the difference between the two. In Odysseus' context, Eurylochus interjected on the premise that the gods are dangerous, but Odysseus was actually going to ask Aeolus for help traversing the storm. In Mutiny, Odysseus is reminding him of the danger, but Eurylochus wants to proceed on nearsighted, selfish, albeit human, desires. This will literally get them damned. Then we return to Luck Runs Out.
How much longer till your luck runs out? How much longer till the show goes south? How much longer till we all fall down? You rely on wind and people die on it. Whoa. How much longer must I suffer
Please
now?
don't do
How
this.
much longer must I push
I
through
need
doubt?
to get
How
home.
much longer must I go about my
Eurylochus.
life like this when people die like this? Whoa.
And this one is actually ironic because when Odysseus says that he took 600 men to war and none of them died there, that's a fact.
Labramides, yo, captain's gone soft. 72 of our dudes are now lost.
And okay, I hear you, the Cyclops Saga. The thing about that is that wasn't war. They were scavenging for food and they encountered the Cyclops. That was not a battle that he knowingly took his men into. It was just an unfortunate event as they journeyed back home. But anyway, even then, his wit is literally what ensured their success. So this part of Luck Runs Out actually applies to the snake that broke free. He is the one that made the show go south and make them all fall down from the beginning. And the line that he uses to justify damning them once and for all is, "I'm just a man."
Eurylochus, no!
Which again could not be further from Odysseus, because when he says the same thing, he is using it as an apology to the infant whom he must kill to ensure the safety of his loved ones and the kingdom in the long run.
I'm just a man.
So the echoes serve to highlight the differences between their characters, not their similarities. And I know we took a little bit of a detour there, but let's return to the theory, which is that Eurylochus most certainly let a siren live. And I already discussed how Odysseus' tone in Different Beast is an indicator for this, but it also just makes thematic sense. It's another way in which they echo each other, but they are not parallel. When Odysseus spares Polyphemus, it comes from a place of mercy and guilt and hopeful naivete. That comes to haunt him in the way of Poseidon, where he must learn that ruthlessness is mercy. On the other hand, when or if Eurylochus spares a siren, it's also probably coming from a place of mercy and guilt, but the difference lies in the fact that he is also probably doing it out of defiance. Naivete simply cannot be used as an excuse for him because he had front row seats when Poseidon taught them that lesson. He should know that ruthlessness is mercy, and even the souls of those who were drowned make a point to reiterate it in the underworld. The only reason Eurylochus would do this is out of defiance or spite for Odysseus. And the narrative is nothing if not consistent with its foreshadowing. In Different Beast, Odysseus says,
Nah, you wouldn't have spared me. I made a mistake like this, it almost cost my life.
but because Eurylochus doesn't have more than a single brain cell, his mistake absolutely costs him his life. That mistake comes back to haunt him when Odysseus must choose between himself and the crew, which, by the way, if there's one thing Eurylochus has, is the audacity. And what of it? Like, I'm confused. What did y'all expect when y'all literally just stabbed him in the back? I'm confused. Why is he confused? Anyway, this is when Eurylochus' mistake comes back to haunt him, because when Odysseus is in the midst of making his decision, who do we hear in the background? Exactly. Period. Case closed. Now, something that tripped me up was the animatic displayed at the live stream, because Penelope comes from the heavens, and I was genuinely confused because when I think siren, I actually think of a deadly mermaid, as in half human with a fish tail who wants to drag you down for nefarious reasons. But my theory still has legs to stand on, because apparently some myths portray sirens as having wings. My brain does have a little bit of a difficulty with this because I just haven't come across those stories organically. But anyway, I was also confused by it because when Odysseus gives the order to kill them all, he says to cut off their tails and throw them back in the water to let them drown. Like, again, there's no references to wings here. And even in the animatic, I don't think she has wings. Penelope is just floating in the heavens. But anyway, the point is, Penelope is in Ithaca. Despite the lack of bubbly electronics, that Penelope is absolutely a siren, and her singing is what pushes Odysseus over the edge. Not that he was ever going to choose the crew, but anyway. I also think that this is a siren because the first time that we hear Penelope, she is a part of Odysseus' dream, and she is encouraging him to wake up. So it's fair to assume that the Penelope who is a figment of Odysseus' imagination wants him to return to Ithaca. Siren Penelope wants to take his suffering from him, which is just a pretty way of telling him that he can die in her arms. So in the end, Eurylochus will have spelled out his own doom because he simply never learns, but more importantly, because he did not learn his place and defied Odysseus one too many times. And that's the theory. I'm not sure if it's a given, but I wanted to talk about it, so that's enough of a reason. And speaking of which, one last thing that I want to talk about in regards to the differences between Odysseus and Eurylochus comes from this line in Mutiny.
If you want all the power, you must carry all the blame!
That strikes me as so odd because at no point in time is Odysseus trying to shift the blame for anything that happens. He always internalizes responsibility. I think Eurylochus is straight up projecting here because after Odysseus is literally stabbed in the back, one would assume that Eurylochus is the de facto captain from that moment on. But once he slaughters the cow, the storm begins to cloud the skies, and Odysseus says that he's doomed them all. And what does Eurylochus say?
You've doomed us. You've doomed us all, Eurylochus!
Captain?
Sir, you just overthrew him, stabbed him, and knocked him out. And also, again, really interesting that in this song, when Eurylochus first refers to him as captain, it's in a callous way because he just sacrificed 6 men.
Look me in the eyes and tell me, Captain.
Then the mutiny happens, and when they land on the island, very notably, Eurylochus no longer refers to him as captain. And no, actually, before this, we can assume that Eurylochus is in fact the de facto captain because if I remember correctly, throughout the entirety of the saga so far, the crew only refers to Odysseus as captain. And I didn't know who this man was until he said his own name. And then, of course, Poseidon says it, but he's a god. The point is, the crew do not refer to Odysseus by his name until mutiny. So in mutiny, his leadership is brought into question and then the duel is ensued. There are those cheering on for Eurylochus, but there are still a few rooting for Odysseus. But the thing is that they are now referring to him by his name.
Eurylochus, Eurylochus, Eurylochus. Odysseus, Odysseus, Odysseus.
So they are theoretically in an even playing field. Then, of course, when it looks like Odysseus is gonna win, he's stabbed in the back by Perimedes. So it was a foul win, but we are to assume that from this point onward, Eurylochus is technically captain now. And then they land on the island of the god of the sun, and Eurylochus refers to him as Odi.
Odie, we're never gonna get to make it home. You know it's true.
So my point is that from the moment that they leave Scylla's cave to the point where they land on the island and right before Eurylochus dooms them, Eurylochus no longer sees Odysseus as captain. So this line where Eurylochus says that if you want all the power, you must carry all the blame, and then ensues the challenge, Eurylochus is insinuating that Odysseus as captain must be held responsible because he holds the power, and Eurylochus's challenge serves as a way to transfer that power onto himself from that moment on. Now, technically, he did not win fair and square, but he did win. He is captain now, but he fumbles the bag, no pun intended, and slaughters one of the sacred cattle. The clouds darken, a storm is on the horizon, and Odysseus calls him out for it.
You've doomed us. You've doomed us all, Eurylochus!
And what does Eurylochus say?
Captain?
Sir, you are captain now. So the way I interpret this is Eurylochus trying to shift the responsibility back to Odysseus. He wanted to hold the power, but did not actually want to carry the blame. Anyway, my point is that that line stood out to me as peculiar because Odysseus never tries to shift blame, so I think Eurylochus was talking to himself at that point. Anyway, this turned more into an analysis instead of a theory, but I think it makes complete sense that Penelope's voice in Thunderbringer is the voice of a siren that Eurylochus failed to kill. Despite all the echoes between Eurylochus and Odysseus, they couldn't be further apart because Odysseus has to learn the hard way, but he paves the way and learns from those mistakes. Eurylochus is a witness to all those mistakes and still makes the exact same ones. He simply has no excuse. That being said, I am sad that his part is over. His voice is so iconic and hearty, and even if he's no longer playing a part moving forward, his arc was so satisfying to hear from when the seed was planted in full speed ahead, then it took root in the Storm Saga, and finally it bore fruit in Mutiny. It's impeccable. Jay did say that he had a whole backstory for Eurylochus in his mind.
I love Eurylochus so much as a character, and I will admit I have thought about making a short sort of origin story for him that would be like canon to the universe of Epic. But yeah, just thoughts I have in my head. I don't want to say too much right now because but I think I get very inspired by him. I have all this like lore for him in my head, and I think it might be cool if one day to sort of bring that to life. Maybe like a short saga or something. Who knows? A prequel, DLC.
So there is a possibility that we may hear him again in a flashback saga, and of course I would love that. But that is all I have for this love letter to Eurylochus. And I mean, it does kind of sound like I'm hating, and I guess I am, but also not really. I love Eurylochus as a character, and his arc was so satisfying. I'm just personally not want to cut him any slack. Like, I think he should be held responsible because he is the reason why the show went south. Like, okay, yes, Odysseus kind of stuck the nail on the wall, but it was Eurylochus who hammered it in. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the upcoming saga. Hopefully, I'll manage to upload this before the release. I'm so ready to meet Antinous because I've heard the snippet to Little Wolf so many times. It's honestly not okay. And the same goes for Hold 'Em Down, but that's not until later.
I'll teach you all the lessons your daddy never could. This cruel world doesn't give out presents just for being good. So
Fight, little wolf, fight.
wanna entertain me?
Fight, little wolf, fight.
Let's see how you take this.
Strike, little wolf, strike.
Wanna be a man then?
Fight, little wolf, fight, little wolf, fight.
Or die, little wolf, die. Don't you know it's fight or fly, little wolf, fly. All because you had to try, little wolf, try. Run away before you die, little wolf, die, little wolf, die.
The point is, I'm so hyped for the Wisdom Saga. I already listen to a few songs from Epic every day, but I'm going all in now. I'm listening to the entire story from beginning to end on repeat to prepare for its release. And I know for a fact that Jorge is going to be one of my top artists on Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year, but I know I won't be the only one. So anyway, let me know all your thoughts on Eurylochus or how hyped you are for the Wisdom Saga down below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the pretty like button, subscribe if you want to see any spells that I cast in this palace, and hit the bell if you want to be notified whenever a ripple becomes a wave. But until then, run, little wolf.